lot of people have reached out to me asking me if the threats from the state government in Virginia, number one, can they happen? And number two, do they have any real teeth? Let me lay it out the best way I know how. I'm going to lay out kind of a timeline of what's happening and what I know from a common sense and a little bit of research that I have done. But let's keep this in mind, and I want to make sure I stress this, that I am in no way an attorney. I don't want to be an attorney. I've never taken any classes to be an attorney, no law classes whatsoever. So what I'm telling you is a mixture of common sense, common knowledge, and a little bit of research that I've done. And a couple of attorneys I've actually bounced some questions off of that have really helped me out as well. Okay, let me lay it out as far as the timeline goes. The Democrats in Virginia gained legislative control over the entire state, as well as the governor's mansion for the first time in decades. So what this typically does in many cases is the back and forth that has taken place for so many years finally comes to an end, and the party that is taking over wants to change as much as they can. Things that they may not have even brought up before because they knew they couldn't pass them, now it emboldens them, so they want to bring these things up. Gun control is one of the main things that everybody wants to put a feather in their cap on the Democrat anti-gun side. What they've done is they pretty much threatened that now that we have control, we're going to do whatever we want. Who cares what the Constitution says? Because they clearly are not listening or reading or paying attention to what the wording in the federal U.S. Constitution is. There's about 8 gun control laws that they are threatening to ram down everybody's throat in the state of Virginia. These are very infringing gun laws. These are, of course, red flag gun laws that eliminate due process and will confiscate people's guns without any due process or court case whatsoever, based on a whim. It's outlawing AR-15s. It's actually outlawing not just AR-15s, but what they, again, the left, associates as a assault weapon. And what they're calling an assault weapon under their definition, this is one of the newer definitions that I've actually seen by the anti-Constitution movement, but they're actually calling any gun that can receive a standard capacity magazine, one that holds more than 10 rounds. 10 rounds is a low capacity magazine. That's like the abnormal magazine. The normal one is 30 in terms of an AR-15. They're saying that any semi-automatic gun that can hold more than 10 rounds in a magazine is actually illegal. Now, what that means is you may actually be trying to follow a law in the state, say, okay, well, I bought a magazine that only holds 10 rounds. Doesn't matter. If your gun is capable of accepting a magazine that will hold 50 rounds, you can actually have your gun confiscated and you are a felon and you go to jail under these new guidelines and laws that the state of Virginia is wanting to pass. Now, I want to remind you guys real quick, because this may come up again in the video later, but let's not forget that Northam is the governor that back in his college days has a picture right next to him with him in the picture. There are 2 guys, and I'll show you the picture here. One guy is in blackface. The other guy is in a Klan outfit, a Ku Klux Klan outfit. Northam and his school saw no harm in putting 2 guys, one in blackface, one in a Klan outfit, in their college yearbook in the 80s. This was not in 1950. This was in the 80s. And they still saw no harm in it. So let's remember that Northam is one of these guys. You can't tell by looking at the picture which one of them he is. He is one of them. And he originally acknowledged that he was one of them and then backtracked that because you can't recognize either one of the guys in the picture. So he said, neither one of them are me. We can't prove that. But it was, because he slipped up and he actually admitted before he retracted that. So let's remember, that's what kind of guy we're dealing with here. We're not dealing with an upstanding person. We're dealing with a full-blown racist. And I've got some other adjectives that I could add to that, but I'm not going to. After the governor launched his series of threats saying that he's going to ram all this gun control down the citizens of Virginia's throats, so far, to date, as of this filming, 75 counties, including 75 sheriffs in those counties, and I think there's 90 counties, something like that, 85 or 90. 75 of those already have said, we're not going to enforce these infringing state laws that Northam and his friends try to ram down the citizens of Virginia's throats. These sheriffs, these are the top law enforcement people in the state. Of every state out there, it's the sheriff. And the sheriffs have said, I'm not enforcing that. Now, after the counties and the sheriffs said that they were not going to enforce any of these laws, Northam had to backtrack a little bit. He definitely crawfished on this one because he realized that, okay, I'm a coward. I can't enforce these laws. I need my sheriffs to do this. And now the sheriffs have just refused to enforce my unconstitutional law. So he backtracked, and this is how some of these anti-gun people do. They're pros at dividing people. You know what he said? Tell you what, guys, instead of outlawing all AR-15s, I'll grandfather them. So I'll let all of you out there have yours if you agree with me that we need to outlaw them for everybody else from here on out. How awesome is that? How much of a jerk is that? This guy is saying, okay, I realize that you're not going to let me have my way, so I'll tell you what I'll do. I will bribe you and let you have yours and make you a horrible person, because I will let you turn on your brother, turn on your neighbor by saying, sorry, dude, I got mine. You should have got yours sooner. That's not very constitutional. And that's not very brave of a governor to make some kind of concession like that, because all that does is turn brother against brother, neighbor against neighbor. But the fine people of Virginia were not buying it anyway. They were not going to turn on their brothers and their sisters and their neighbors. So one of their state reps ran his mouth and popped off a little bit, saying that, well, maybe Northam just needs to nationalize the National Guard. Hold on, big fella. You need to learn what you do. See, this is like a janitor who can't clean a toilet. Doesn't know the rules. You, meaning the governor, cannot nationalize the National Guard. You can activate the National Guard. You can tell the National Guard to mobilize and go do things, but you cannot nationalize them. Words mean things. Activating the National Guard and nationalizing the National Guard are not the same thing. Now, you know who can nationalize the National Guard? President Trump. Northam can't nationalize the Virginia National Guard, but Donald Trump can. So what could happen, in theory, Northam could try to mobilize the National Guard and have them go stand in front of stores or whatever, in places to try to intimidate people. What could happen is Donald Trump, once those people get activated, could say, okay, fine, Northam, now I'm nationalizing them. And they could turn around and face the opposite direction and now protect these people from letting the state infringe against them and their Second Amendment rights, because it is a federally constitutional law that they're trying to infringe upon. So this could blow up on Northam altogether. He could have the same troops that he mobilizes spin around, do a 180-degree turn, and go right back at them and say, we're not doing anything, and now we're protecting these people's Second Amendment rights. But one thing that we do need to point out is that the Fourth Amendment also applies. Let's say Trump didn't do this. Let's say Trump did not nationalize the troops, and Northam tries to make these troops go out. He activates them and tries to get them to go out and somehow confiscate AR-15s. Let's just use AR-15s as an example. That can't happen. Not only now are you, and the Supreme Court has ruled on this, AR-15s are commonly used, so they are constitutional. This is a Supreme Court precedent that's already been struck. So they would be going against the Constitution and the Supreme Court by going after these AR-15s. But let's say they do. Now these people, Northam, the state, and the National Guard would now be violating the Second Amendment by trying to violate people's Second Amendment rights, but also the Fourth Amendment, which protects the average law-abiding citizen from unlawful search and seizure. So their illegal search and seizures would be unconstitutional against the Second Amendment and the Fourth Amendment, not to mention all the other amendments out there where you have to pay a citizen back for something that you take from them. There's a slew of amendments that would have to be repealed or violated in order for these people to do what they're actually threatening to do. Guys, this is my feeling about laws, especially Second Amendment laws, but any law that pertains to the Constitution. If anyone, I don't care which party you're speaking of, Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, Independent, if anybody, if any person, if any party, if anyone can abuse these laws and make it hard on somebody else who is not doing anything wrong and who is not doing anything unconstitutional, that is not a just law. And that law does not need to go into effect. I don't care if it's a law that you could abuse or I could abuse. a Democrat can abuse or a Republican can abuse. Even if a Republican or conservative, because I consider myself conservative, not Republican, if a conservative can still twist the law and abuse it to hurt somebody, I don't want that law passed. Because we know that powers exchange. And at some point, that person that you're rah-rahing about because he's abusing a law against your enemy, at some point your enemy will be sitting in that chair and they will be using that law to infringe upon you.